everybody? My name is FMS Isaac, and I'm here with a video on Guardians of the Galaxy 2, Volume 2. I'm watching this like 12 hours after I watched the first one, so I'm into the Guardians of the Galaxy stuff right now. And this movie came out 3 years after the last one, and it's just crazy, right? Because you look at 3, it came out May of this year, and that came out 6 years after the second one. So it's like, bro, they've been waiting for a long time. The fans have been waiting. So the fact that it's here and apparently it's really good, it just gets me even more excited because that's the last one that I have to watch. But that's not about this. This is about this, and this is too. So let me get into my spoiler-free opinions on this movie. So this movie, I just want to say I don't like it as much as the first one, which sucks. But that's not to say that it's a bad movie. I think this movie's a 7 to a 7.5 out of 10 compared to the 8 that the last one was, even bordering an 8.5. The generalization is just basically, I felt like the jokes were really hammed in during this movie, and it just kind of ruined some of the characters for some sections, and it just felt like, man, you guys gotta relax, bro. This is, it felt more like a Marvel movie than the last one did, and it's because of the humor. If not handled right, and if it's overused, it can really be grating, and it's just like, you're sitting there, you're watching this movie, and just like, oh my goodness, please shut up and move on to the next scene. Like, I'm so tired of some of these jokes. And that's how it felt sometimes, which sucks. But that's one of the negatives. The other negatives are more plot specific. But besides that, I felt like this movie had some worse moments, but some really good improvements as well. Like the character writing and the plot, like the villain is a lot. I like him a lot more in this movie than I did in the last one. The villain is a lot more engaging, a lot more thought provoking. It's just like, yeah, man, this is cool. This villain's he's fire. And then you have the characters themselves, and you think like, oh, Guardians of the Galaxy 1, you really see the people grow, come together, and just become the Guardians of the Galaxy. And here you see the growing pains of that, right? Because you gotta remember what happened in the first movie and how it all came together. It makes sense why they would have growing pains, right? And so I'm perfectly fine with that. And the way that the story turned out, again, like the highs and lows, they're either really bad and unbearable or they're really good. And the good usually stands out above that bad. So that's why I consider like a 7 to a 7.5. So I don't mind it as much, but I don't have that same feeling that I did when I watched the first movie last night. But overall, I enjoyed this movie, just not as much as I did the first one. So would I recommend it? Yeah, you'll definitely derive some enjoyment from it because it still has the same values of the first movie. And overall, it still feels like a Guardians of the Galaxy movie. You take it with a grain of salt, basically. But regardless, 7 out of 10. I'm gonna just stick with the 7. I'm gonna go on to the spoiler stuff. So, if you don't want to hear any spoilers on this movie, then leave now, like right now. This movie picks up where the Guardians are on a planet and they have to protect some batteries from coming to harm from like an alien that's trying to attack it, right? And this society is high society. It's like they're super, like first class. They're gonna get a reward for it, and that's why they're doing this, right? And this intro is just basically that. It's them fighting this monster, having this cool action set piece. I actually liked the intro. I had a fun time watching Groot just dance about with the cassette player playing and all that, and it was cool. I messed with it. I think it did go on for a little long, but luckily, as soon as I started thinking that, they ended it. So it's just like, oh, okay, you know what? It goes on for a little long, like it drags, but not to the point where it's annoying or irritating. So they defeat the monster. They protect the batteries, at least as many as they can, and then they go to the sovereign, and they're just like, "Yo, thank you for all this, blah blah blah." And then Star Lord's just like, "Yeah, whatever." And we find out that Rocket actually stole some batteries from them. Why? mm he doesn't need them, but he did. And so once the sovereign finds out about this, they're like, "Oh shoot, we're gonna hunt you." And the reward, by the way, the reward wasn't money; it was Nebula, because they found out that she was here, and so they're keeping her, A, to make sure that she's alive. Bring Nebula onto the ship. They hold her hostage, and you can tell like Gamora cares for her sister. It's just that they also try to kill each other a lot. So that's something that comes with the territory, I guess. but they're being chased by this group, and it's a crazy set piece. Like this is all the intro to the movie still. It's like 20 minutes in or whatever. Basically, they have to leave that version of the galaxy and go to another one farther away, and also because somebody saves them, and it's somebody on a ship, right? And once they leave that area, and by the way, during the whole time, Rocket and Peter are just having this huge quarrel with each other, and they're just not getting along. And Gamora's just like, "Dog, we're going to die if you two don't shut up." And they manage to get away safely. And we find out that the person that saved them is actually Peter's dad, Peter Quill's dad. And he just introduces himself, and he has an assistant. Her name is Mantis. We'll learn more about her later. He's just like, yo, let me take you to my planet real quick, right? And so I'll come back to that in a second. Next, though, you have Yondu and his Ravagers, his space Ravagers, and they're on a planet. They're chilling. They're just having a good time. It's not a very morally sound planet. I'll say that for sure. So Yondu's leaving because he sees somebody outside that he recognizes, and that person is actually Sylvester Stallone. And we learn some lore about Yondu here, where he actually was exiled from the Ravager like core. They're a whole association, and they have one code: don't deal in children, because they have morals. Even though sometimes they don't, because some unsavory types usually are in the Ravagers, like some of Yondu's crew. Like a lot of them are some boneheads, honestly. But they have that one rule, and he broke it. And we'll learn more about that rule later as to how he broke it. But you may or may not like Yondu at the end of the movie. I'll say that for sure. So they just have like this whole quarrel, and it sucks. Yondu's just hurt, and he gets a call from the Sovereign that they betrayed in the beginning of the movie. And now Yondu's chasing after Star-Lord. And so back on the Guardian side, we have Rocket, Groot, and Nebula staying behind because Nebula has to be watched, right? And their ship is broken, by the way, because they crash landed when they escaped. Those three are staying behind. Meanwhile, Gamora, Drax, and Star Lord are going with his father, right? And that's basically how the movie's gonna be for like the rest of it. For a good majority of it, it's gonna be split into two perspectives. So just get used to that. But Star Lord and the rest of them go to his father's planet, and this is where we learn a lot more about his father, right? Where he's actually an ancient, somebody who just has mass power over the universe, right? He can create and do a lot of things. And in reality, he's just a brain. He's not actually a human or like any physical being. All he is just a stem, and that's it. And that's why his planet is actually just that planet was built around it. And so Star Lord's just learning all of this, and he learns too that he has powers as well. And so he's trying to learn some of them, all this stuff. It's interesting. Meanwhile, Gamora isn't so trusting, right? She believes that something wrong is happening here. And so she's talking to Drax, she's talking to Peter, and she's just like, yo, something's wrong. I don't understand. Something is wrong. And it isn't helped by the fact that Mantis feels like she isn't telling them the whole truth. And she isn't. You can tell that she isn't. And one thing that we learned about Mantis is that she can actually feel people's emotions. It's been memed like crazy, but she's actually an empath, so she can literally touch you and feel what emotions you're feeling in the deep subconscious. And so she sees a lot of Peters, she sees a lot of Drax. Gamora doesn't let her touch her, but it's just nice. It's nice learning about Mantis. She's a nice girl who hasn't had an interaction with anybody ever. But going back to Raccoon for a second, to Rocket Raccoon, we see him just chilling with Nebula and Groot, and he sets up a bunch of traps because he realizes that people are gonna come after him. There's no way that they aren't. And lo and behold, they do. Yondu especially. He captures them after like a whole action set piece going on, and then he brings them back to the ship. But there's actually a mutiny that happened, and so Yondu gets usurped by Taserface, which is one of the guys who we see in the beginning just have doubts about Yondu and his leadership, right? And half of the crew rallies behind him, while the other half rallies against Yondu. Once they actually usurp Yondu because Nebula shot his power thing off of his head, and the reason why that actually matters is because that's how he controls his whistle. So that arrow that goes around, he whistles, and the reason why that works is because that thing on his head is what controls it, and it's sound based, right? And so she destroyed it, and now he's just useless at this point. So they're all in the ship and they're imprisoned. And the people that were with Yondu, they got sent off of the ship and they got just they died in space. You know how in space you can't breathe and your head just bloats and everything. It's crazy. It's actually wild that they showed it too. It was just sad. Like it shows the evils of the Ravagers and how some of them are unsavory types. Like I said in the beginning, they're just some of them are evil people. And so Rocket and what's his name, Yondu are together. Meanwhile, Groot is being treated as a mascot, and Nebula just basically like, yo, get me off of the ship. I helped you usurp your leader. Send me some money and get me off the ship. So she takes one of them and she leaves, right? And Rocket and Yondu are talking and they're getting to understand each other better, right? He's asking about why he even captured Pete, or not Pete, that's Peter Parker, why he captured Peter Quill, and he's just like, because his father wanted me to catch him and bring him to him, right? And the reason why he kept him was because he was good at sneaking around, the same reason why that Peter gave in the beginning of the movie. But we're starting to see that there's more to that than just that reason. And so him and just Rocket are having a really heartfelt heart to heart, just them learning about each other and understanding the pain that they have. And it's nice, you know, they are understanding each other better. And so Groot shows up and they're just like, yo, go get Yondu his thing because we're going to break out, right? And Groot fails a bunch. It's a really drawn out gag. Honestly, I didn't really mess with it that much. At first, I thought it was funny. Then the next 6 times that they did it wasn't funny at all. And it's like it's a plot point because Groot is a child at this point, so it makes sense why he wouldn't be able to. But it's like, man, lay off on it just a little bit, please. Some of the jokes just are ham-fisted into your face, bro. It's crazy. But then luckily, Kraglin, one of Yondu's like old members, you know, the one who was with him, he's just like, yo, I'll help you, boss. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to join the mutiny. I just didn't want to die. Our friends died, boss. And he's just like, dog, let's go get the ship. And so they get all the parts that they need. They have a whole riot and they kill everybody who rallied against them and they leave the ship. Then we go back to Star Lord, right? And I want to mention something. So my gripes with this movie are mostly with the jokes. But one of the ones that I hate the most was, or not hate, but more like just don't like, it's Drax and Groot sometimes, right? Groot, this is the Groot that I know that was like, all the middle-aged people are just like, oh my gosh, he's so cute and funny, and I'm just like, dog, man. But what about the last one? What about the sage? What about the guy that we knew? And it's like, yeah, of course he's a child, so it's not gonna be the same character. But it feels like at this point he didn't serve much of a purpose except for just being comedic relief and having one important moment in the movie. And I'll mention that later. But it's like, man, it seems like his character got reduced to a gag. Same with Drax too. That's the other person I was gonna mention. He just his jokes, they're not funny. His jokes are not funny at all, and the movie uses him a lot. And it's like that Drax that we saw in the last movie is nothing like the Drax that we have now, and I think that's good because it shows character development and that he's getting acclimated to the Guardians. But it also just like relax, please. The jokes, tone them back a little bit. It's reducing his character to just being a gag character, man. Like it's not good. It's not good. But yeah, that's my little rant aside. So they're back on the planet, and now Nebula's chasing after Gamora after Gamora and Peter had a nice conversation. It was just basically like, what are we? And then she's like, we're nothing. They're something. And so Nebula's just trying to kill Gamora. Really cool fight. I don't even like a really cool fight where she has the ship, she crashes it into a cave, and they're just fighting like it's all beef and everything. And Gamora saves Nebula. Nebula pulls out her knife and she's just like, yo, I win. And the reason why she was doing this was because she just wanted to win one time against her sister because every time that they fought, and it was because Thanos made them fight, because Thanos was making the ultimate warrior like children that he has, right? And Gamora would always win. And so every time Gamora would win, Thanos would replace a body part on Nebula's body. And that's why she can like regenerate or rearrange her bodies and her bones and her organs and all that. And she's just not a living organic being anymore. She is just all machine. And so her and Gamora are talking about that, and Nebula's just like, I want my sister. I didn't have one. All I had was a warrior who was next to me, and a father who's a horrible human being or being. And that's one thing that they can both unite on. They hate their father because he just came around, killed everybody, took them from their planet, and left. And that's it. So Nebula's now with Gamora, and they're just basically trying to reacquaint themselves, get acclimated with them, building a family, right? And so they see the bones in the cave, and they realize something is horribly wrong with this planet. And Mantis is talking to Drax, and she's just like, something bad is about to happen. You need to stop Peter from talking to his dad. And so we have the infamous scene in this movie, the very, very infamous scene of Peter talking to his dad, and he shows him the eternity in the universe, right? And you would think that that would like destroy him and completely ruin his mental faculties. Nah, he's perfectly fine. He's completely fine. And so Peter is just witnessing his father talking about all this and his master plan of like, yo, I'm gonna take over the universe and make everything me so that life isn't short, and that we make the universe better. I didn't want to live along with life. I wanted to be life, right? And so Peter is just like, but what about my mom? What about her? And then he's just like, man, it sucks, but I had to leave because it's for the master plan, Peter. It really sucks that I had to put that tumor in her head. I needed a reason not to come back. And then this is the scene of Star Lord, and his face zooms in, and all you hear is what? And it's just like, I know that sounds bad. And that's where the meme comes from. It comes from this movie. And so he obviously shoots him up because he's like, you killed my mother. You horrible, horrible man. I hate you. And so now his dad is the main villain of this movie, with the Sovereign being the second antagonist in this movie. And so now it's Peter versus his dad. They're just beefing. All this stuff is happening. Rocket and Yondu and Groot show up and they save everybody. And now it's basically like, yo, we have to stop his father because he's going to destroy the universe. Just like with the last one with the Infinity Stone, this time it's an ancient god. And so they have a master plan. Rocket uses the batteries that he has to make a time bomb. He sends Groot in to basically blow up the brain itself because destroying the physical body won't do anything. So everybody else is just fighting against him while Groot is, putting the bomb in. Have these crazy scenes. We have so the reason why Yondu was doing all this with the children, it was basically that he didn't understand what was going on with him. So he was being paid handsomely by Peter's dad, and he's just like, once he found out what he was doing with the children, he was taking them away from him. He took Peter because that was the one where he found out, like, yo, you're going to kill these children if they don't work out for you. And so he kept Peter and stopped doing his bidding, and that's why he kept him and he raised him because what was the better alternative, sending him to his father and potentially having him die? So basically, it just shows that Yondu isn't a horrible human or a horrible person. It's just that he had to be that type of father to make sure that Peter was kept alive. It was the actual father figure instead of the biological father figure. And it's a nice dichotomy, because you realize the father that you never wanted was the father that you actually needed, and the father that you wanted is the father that you did not need whatsoever or even want. And so it's just a nice lesson and a nice message behind that. Peter is using the powers now that he has to fight his father. And he keeps him here because the planet, like the bomb's about to explode now. And Yondu stays behind because Rocket gives him a jetpack and a spacesuit, and Yondu knows what he's going to do. He tells Rocket like, yo, please, I haven't been a good man my entire life. Let me be this man once. And so he's just like, all right. And he leaves. And Gamora, Nebula, Mantis, Drax, and Kraglin are on the ship. Rocket shows up, and then Gamora's just like, yo, where is Quill? Where is he? And then Gamora realizes that he's still on the planet, and so she goes to try and save him. but Rocket shoots her in the back and like she's just like, yo, I can't lose another friend today. And you realize at the end of the movie who that friend really was. But regardless, Peter's just beating up his dad, like actually boxing, bro. It's like Gohan versus Cell. It's so fire. And so his dad's losing completely. And once the bomb's about to explode, he realizes like, please, like, don't do this. And then Pete's just like, dog, I don't care if I'm a normal human being after this. You're not my father. And so, or the bomb blows up the planet, excuse me. And then Yondu being there, being the goat that he is, he's just like, yo, I got you, Pete. And so he grabs him, he puts the jetpacks on his body, and he puts the spacesuit on Peter. And so they fly up, they enter in space to make sure that they live. And Yondu, since he doesn't have the space gear, he dies. And it's just a really, really sad scene. Honestly, like Yondu's death hit me a lot harder than I thought it would. And I love that. I love that so much because this is a man that you see in the beginning of the first movie that you hate. You hate him because of the way that he's described. You don't like him because of how he treated Quill. That he kidnapped him. And now you see him and you realize the meaning behind those actions and that was the closest thing to a father that you're ever gonna have. And so the fact that he's dying in your arms and that the last thing that he did for you was saving you, even though you've betrayed him over and over and over again. It's really impactful. And so they manage to find him and they pick him up. And the Sovereigns, like their droids, they all died on the planet. So it's just basically like, give up, dog. You're not gonna get the Guardians. Like they're chilling. And so they pick up Quill, and they're just mourning the loss of Yondu, right? They're mourning him, and they have a funeral for him. And one of the things that they mentioned in the beginning of the movie was that Yondu was never going to get a Ravager's funeral, excuse me, because he broke the code. And so Rocket, last second effort, told all the Ravagers what Yondu did and why he did it, and they all showed up. And now they understand he broke the code, but for a good reason. And they're all here and they give him the funeral. And it's a really, really emotional scene. I'm not gonna lie to you, like it kind of got me. And now you have Mantis and Nebula being added onto the group. Yondu being an honorary Guardians member, even though he died. It's just like, dang, man, that sucks. It was just beautiful. It was really beautiful. Like that funeral was the best way to end that movie, and I'm so glad they did it that way because it really hit. It really hit. Because even if you didn't like Yondu or not, it's just that meaning, that sentiment behind all of them showing up and having that funeral for him. It's moving. It's genuinely moving. So that's the end of the movie, and my thoughts. Again, I think it's a movie that has its ups that are better than the first movie and downs that are worse than the first movie. The first movie is more consistent, more of a whole story, and the second movie just feels like it could have been better if some things were just changed for me. And again, this is, or not again, but this is my opinion. You don't have to agree with me. If anything, this could be your favorite movie. And I wouldn't blame you because it does have the makings to be the better sequel. But for me, it just wasn't it. It didn't hit as much as it did for the first movie. Even though I think that the villain is better, that the character writing is better, that the planets that they're on do look beautiful. I still have those gripes of the comedy was pretty bad, and that I wish that we got to see more planets. And I wish that the sovereigns were more important and not just being complete cornballs. I don't know. There's just things for me that I wish could be improved upon. And they're just sometimes they're gripes, other times they're genuine complaints. But this movie just didn't hit the same as the first one. Again, no, understand. I'm not saying that to be like this movie's bad. It's not. It's a 7 to a 7.5 for me. I think it's good enough to be considered a good movie, but not good enough to be considered a great movie. But yeah, that's gonna be it for me for now. That's my opinion on the movie. Soundtrack was just as good as the first one. I like the first one better because I recognize more songs from there. But I did recognize the songs here too, so it's cool. The CGI improving as always. I felt like the first one it had more of a flex for the CGI, but this one it's also a good display because it has the planets themselves being the flex instead of the action. So I think that's pretty cool. And the story, a better story for sure. I think it was definitely a better story. Not in terms of like the scenes, but more like just as a whole, this story makes more sense than the first one. While the first one, I enjoyed the story more, as in like the scenes that we saw them in visually. The story in this one is just like, this is a better written story for sure. Just overall, that's my opinion on it. Thank you all for watching. Hope y'all enjoy. I'll see you all in the next video. Peace.